Let's talk for a minute about this whole thing about calling and following. This New Testament thing. The word follow is in the New Testament, I forget exactly, over 100 times. And it's used exclusively for following Jesus. And Jesus calls those that follow him. All of his close followers are called by Jesus. And Jesus doesn't say, let me give you some good reasons to follow me. Let me give you 10 good reasons to follow me. He just says, follow me. People do. Makes me wonder if Jesus calls people today. And if so, where do we go? I mean, in the Gospels, it's a very physical thing. Jesus says, follow me, and they go somewhere. How's that supposed to work? Interesting, too, that in other traditions, other religious traditions, the pattern is reversed. One is seeking. Someone wants to know the truth. So someone goes and finds a teacher and asks the teacher to be a disciple. And if the teacher says yes, then they become an apprentice. And eventually, maybe after many years, the teacher will say, okay, now you're ready to be a teacher. Christian tradition turns that around. The leaders of the church are those who say they are called. And if they pass all the vetting processes, then they are ordained as called leaders. Just saying, it's a really interesting model. Might contribute to our sense of, our Western sense of independence. That we're called to whatever we do in life. And we're not predetermined. We choose that. And society doesn't tell us what to do. It's a very Western notion. You know, the other traditions don't think that way. Just saying, it might be worth thinking about. Now, if we listen to the gospel today, there's a man called Matthew who is called, and he follows. We don't really know anything about this Matthew. It's highly unlikely that he wrote the gospel called Matthew. All we know is that he's a tax collector. And a tax collector in those times was not an employee of the IRS, okay? Tax collector worked for the Roman overlords. They were collecting taxes from the people. So Matthew is one of the people, but he's not working for the people. He's working for the Romans. And if he happens to collect a little bit more than the Romans expect, he can put that in his pocket. Pretty scummy trade, really. And so people get concerned because Jesus is hanging around with Matthew and other tax collectors and sinners. Now, maybe we're kind of conditioned after a while. When we hear sinners and tax collectors, we think, oh, those are the good guys. Those are the common people. That's the salt of the earth. But if we go back to when the story's told, we're not meant to relate to those people. Those are the people that disturb us. These sinners and tax collectors, they're the people that ride on the bus and you don't want to make eye contact. You know what I mean? Or like this tax collector, Matthew, he's like one of those sort of shady lawyers that chases after ambulances and says he's helping people, but you know he's really just trying to make the system work to line his pockets, you know? These aren't people you're comfortable with. The Pharisees, on the other hand, when we hear Pharisees now, we all think, oh, those are the bad guys. Those are the self-righteous guys. At the time of the story, that's not what you would think. Pharisees are the good citizens. They're well-mannered. They give a lot to charity. They're on the school board. They have an honest business. And they go to church every single week. And what Jesus is saying is, you know, all those people you think have got it together, they're in the dark. But if someone thinks that they have a problem, well, maybe I can help them. I came to call sinners. Which means, if you think you're called by Jesus, you got a problem. There's something wrong with you. To be called by Jesus doesn't mean to be holier. Au contraire. It means we need some help. And I actually know a lot of priests who say that being called to ordination was probably the only thing that gave them any hope of ever being saved. That ordination is sort of God's last resort to pull someone out of the muck. I think Jesus calls everyone. Jesus calls each of us to follow. The real question is, what are we going to do about it? Amen.